In this video, I'm going to be discussing the pigments that make the colors in daylily flowers. Welcome to the Art of Breeding with Brian Reeder. There are only two major pigment groups in the daylily flowers. One is keratin, and the other is anthocyanin. Now, of course, there's not just one type of anthocyanin, and there's probably not just one type of keratin. In the keratin, there is also a mutation that changes the keratin into lycopene. The lycopene is based upon a switch of the keratin to lycopene. So it's still, in my mind or way of thinking, part of the keratin group, because literally it's the keratin being changed into lycopene. Now, I have long thought there were two different kinds of keratin. One producing a bright yellow or a pale yellow or a canary yellow, and the other producing what I call gold, which is a dark yellow or an orange yellow. I spoke with a researcher a few years ago who suggested that when you have a flower without anthocyanin that is yellow, those with violozanthin are lemon yellow versus those with zeaxanthin, which are yellow-orange. So he says that the violozanthin and zeaxanthin are the two different kinds of keratin, which are forming the two different families of yellow flowers. Those that are more orangey or dark yellow, that would be the zeaxanthin, and those that are the light yellow to near white to pale yellow to canary yellow would be the violozanthin. I have had a researcher suggest to me that there are two kinds of lycopene, and thus two genes, one that changes one form of keratin, one that changes another form of keratin. If that's the case, then there is a gene that changes keratin to lycopene, which affects the violozanthin, while there is another gene that changes keratin to lycopene that affects the zeaxanthin. But that's not 100% confirmed. It is possible that it's the same gene, which we call melon in the daylily world, that changes both violozanthin and zeaxanthin to lycopene. The range of melon flowers, those that are lycopene based, range from dark orangey melon, something like orange velvet, that people call orange often, even though it's not the anthocyanin orange that we know from the Hemerocallis fulva, all the way down to the very palest cream and ecru, which is the exact same spectrum in melon that we see in the yellows, all the way from near white to dark rich gold, as in Mary's gold, all the way from, in the lycopene, from dark rich orangey melon, all the way down to the palest creams. The keratin base, whether it's keratin or lycopene, is deep in the petal. It's in the lower parts of the petal and saturates up near to the surface. So it is the base coloring. Anthocyanin is a water-based pigment, and it does not penetrate very deep into the petal. It lays up on the surface. So it is a sheet over the keratin or the lycopene. And it is, can vary in how dense it is. And it allows, especially when light hits it, it allows the undercolor to show through. So that's going to influence the colors you get, because we now have to think a little bit about color theory. Well, first let me tell you what the anthocyanins do. Anthocyanins in the species are orange to red. But in the domestic daylilies, they can range from orange to red to all shades of pink to all shades of lavender to purple, all the way to brown and to a whole range of colors falling sort of in between maroon, silvery grayish tones that are related to lavender. These are all deriving from the anthocyanin layer. Now, the way they visually appear to our eyes can be deeply influenced by the keratin or lycopene that is under the anthocyanin. And here we need to look at color theory for a moment. In color theory, there are primary colors, there are secondary colors, and there are tertiary colors. Primary colors are the three main colors: yellow, blue, red. They can be combined to make secondary colors. Any two primary colors blended will make a secondary color. So blue and yellow make green, yellow and red make orange, blue and red make purple. So purple, orange, and green are secondary colors. If you take green, which has two colors, and you combine it with red, which is the third color, in other words, now you've got all three primaries blended, you get a tertiary color, three colors blended, and that goes into brownish hues. That looks basically tones of brown and earth tones. Tertiary colors will tend to be what we call muddy in the daylily world, which I don't like the term, but that's what's generally used for those kind of colors in the daylily world. They go into earth tones. Earth tones are the three primaries blended. So now when we're thinking about daylilies, if you have yellow keratin as the base color, and you put lavender or purple anthocyanin on top of that yellow, now you have something that's going to go kind of brownish. Purple is red and blue. Yellow is the third color. So now you're going to get dirty, so-called, that's what they call them in the hobby, dirty colors, muddy colors. You're going to have something that you may be able to see the purple to some extent, but it's going to have that yellow showing through, and it's going to be an off tone. It's not going to be a clear, clean tone. So how do you get a clear, clean purple? Well, you have to have the lycopene mutation to begin with. So you change the keratin to lycopene, and then you need it to be on the lightest version. So if it's true that the violazanthin is the one you want a version of violazanthin that's as light as possible. You change it with the lycopene switch gene so that it becomes the lightest version of lycopene possible. There are probably intensifiers or diluter genes that either intensify the pigment or decrease the amount of pigment affecting the keratins and lycopenes. You combine those in such a way that you get the lightest lycopene base and then put the purple over that. And that is the doorway to getting the cleanest, clearest purples. On the petal back of a very clean purple or lavender or pink or even some reds, even some oranges in modern fancies, you'll notice that the pigment on the back is almost clear. It's almost like flesh tone. It's very, like pale white flesh. It's like someone like me that never goes out in the sun. I'm covered even when I go out in the daytime to work. So it will be almost a clear, transparent tone. And that's how you get these cleanest tones. So layering the anthocyanins over the keratin or the lycopene is going to determine what you get. Now, red, for instance, can work beautifully over any of them. Oranges can work beautifully over any of the keratins or lycopenes. If you put even orange and red over the clearest, palest lycopene, you'll get a much more primary, clean, clear, middle value tone that doesn't go wonky in any way. Now, some of the really interesting colors, in my opinion, occur because of the tertiary tones. So, for instance, when you've got brown anthocyanin, if you layer it over orange or yellow, the dark carotenes, the golden yellow, you tend to get a deeper, richer, warmer, like warm chocolate brown. Where if you put that same brown tone over a lycopene, it will be more of a medium, like medium wood tone brown. And you can get all different shades of brown. Now, daylily people don't tend to like brown. They complain about it. But daylilies actually have some of the best genetics for brown coloring of any of the garden flowers. Orchid people have really gone to town with brown. They do not run away from it. They embrace it, and they're beautiful brown orchids. Iris people also have bred up beautiful brown irises. And daylilies, there should be a lot more gorgeous browns because there are good genes for brown in the daylilies, but daylily people are afraid of brown. One other thing I want to mention in terms of color is there's always this pursuit of true black, true white, and true blue. And we certainly have some very bluish lavenders. There are some eye zones that, because of refraction in the right light, can look sky blue. But if you take that and lay it against something that is truly sky blue, it's not. It's lavender. It's an illusion to our eye because of the refraction of light. But I don't believe we'll ever get true white, because I think when you take that much pigment out, you probably weaken the plant. I don't think we'll ever get true jet black, because I just think that's a lot. We've got plants pretty close, flowers that are pretty close. And I don't think we'll ever have true pigment blue like my background, unless we gene engineer them. I just don't think the genes are there. And for me, that's fine. But there are bluish tones that occur in certain plants, like plants coming out of substantial evidence, like pigment of imagination that goes through a color change through the course of the day, where the pigments, basically in the petal, the pigments die and vanish, or they seem to evaporate and vanish and reveal deeper and deeper layers, and it changes colors through the course of the day. And those will often go through phases at certain times where they are turquoise blue. I have also seen green versions like jade green emerge out of those, and it's quite beautiful. But I've not done I did a lot of work with those at the diploid level. But I had a hard time getting that onto a good quality plant, and then I quit with diploids, and I don't have much of that going on in my tetraploids, even though some of them do descend from substantial evidence conversions. That may eventually arise, but it's not something I'm focusing on. The genes are there, it may come back out. That may be a doorway to true blue, but it's not this kind of blue, like my background. It's not true sky blue. It's a different... If you lay it on something truly blue, you can see that it's not true blue. It's beautiful and it's fabulous, but it's not blue. And it's actually like a very bluish purple. But it's still not that thing, and it's only occurring in these plants that are changing color, and it's not stable, and it doesn't seem to hold. I've not seen anyone yet get that to stabilize, so I don't think those kind of pigments are possible. But that bluish turquoise color, I have worked a lot with the substantial evidence family, and I have produced numerous seedlings that have that pigment combined with flesh tones that produce these really interesting flesh tones. It's like lavender and maybe a little bit of orange mixed with the anthocyanin, so that you're getting these tertiary tones where you've got a little bit of warm orange and you've got this bluish turquoise, and then you've got a little bit of lavender to pink mixed with it, and you get these interesting sandy flesh colors. My introduction, Wabi Sabi, has that. And what's interesting is that it's from those kind of flowers, plants with those kind of flowers, that I have produced the closest to blue I've ever seen in seedlings. They weren't on great plants. They didn't get introduced. I didn't continue on with them. But so some of these tertiary tones are quote-unquote muddy because they carry these pigments that daylily people are striving to achieve, and you just have to get them in the right combinations to reveal themselves. So it's an interesting dichotomy that daylily breeders want these unusual colors, but they're often throwing away the plants that actually carry them, but aren't fully expressing them so that you can see them with your eye. You have to understand color theory and how colors layer in order to understand what you're looking at. Daylily flower pigments are an interesting subject, and we'll come back to it with some frequency as we talk about daylilies. But I do want to point out just a few last little things, and that is, it appears to me that the zeaxanthin form of keratin is dominant to the violazanthin form, because if you cross the gold type that's homozygous for that, the zeaxanthin, to the paler yellow or bright yellow that is homozygous for the violazanthin, then you get the darker flower. So either the violazanthin is recessive or they are codominant, and you're seeing the zeaxanthin darker form and thinking, oh, well, that's dominant. My guess is that one is recessive to the other, but what I do know is crossing the gold yellow to the lighter, brighter yellows will produce an intermediate that tends more toward the darker color. Anthocyanin, basically you can have anthocyanin or you can not have visible anthocyanin. I say visible because when you look at daylily flowers that show no visible anthocyanin with a black light, you can often see invisible anthocyanin that is invisible to the naked human eye, but is visible in the higher spectrums that the pollinators like bees and moths see in. So when we're saying like a solid yellow flower or a solid golden flower, it's important to think in terms of non-visible anthocyanin versus visible anthocyanin. My experience suggests strongly that visible anthocyanin is dominant to non-visible anthocyanin. So you can get anthocyaninic flowers from crossing anthocyaninic flowers to non-anthocyaninic flowers, but the heterozygotes will often be a little less intense and maybe a little more diffuse in their coloring. They're not as strong. So the best anthocyanic flowers, in my opinion, are homozygous for anthocyanin. I'm not even going to begin to get into like eye patterns and eye edge and these kind of things, but I'll just touch on one thing real briefly, and that is you can have instances where you have this darker, more medium yellow to dark yellow keratin and layer that over by lavender or purple, and if you have the eye edge, you'll see the stronger, darker tone in the eye and in the edge, but then on the petal, people would say, well, they don't have the dark purple on the petal, but what they have is they have the dark purple on the rest of the petal. It's just a much more diluted, lower concentration of the pigment, and so you don't really recognize it's there. But like in my cultivar Sundragon, that people would say, well, Sundragon, that's just an orange daylily with a sort of lavendery to reddish eye. But actually what it is a golden yellow that's carrying the lighter yellow keratin and also carries the lycopene mutation, but it's visually the medium to dark yellow keratin as the base with lavender layered over it. And because of the gene that makes eyes an edge, the lavender is concentrated out onto the edge and into the eye and creates a lavender to reddish coloring. And then it's in a very light layer over the petal, which our eye then is deceived and makes it appear to our brains. We perceive it as an orangey, peachy tone. But in reality, that's actually lavender layered lightly over the deeper keratin base. So the more you can learn to recognize what you're seeing, to recognize how color works, how our eyes perceive color, because breeding daylilies is not like mixing paint. You'll hear that often, and it's true, but our perception of color is the same whether we're talking about how we mix paint or what we're perceiving when we look at a daylily flower. If you would like to know more on this subject, I have a fairly long article up at my blog called Getting Clear About Color. And you can find it listed in the contents from the year 2021. So that's at daylilybreeder.blogspot.com. I go into a lot more detail, and there's a lot of pictures, and I go into a lot more detail in that article about color theory and about the science of how our eyes perceive color. So it's a good read if you're interested in this subject. But we'll be covering it more in future videos, and until next time. Thank you for visiting my channel. I hope this video was interesting to you. If you would like to know more about this subject, leave a comment or question below in the comments section. Please leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell notification to be alerted when new videos post. You can find my poultry books on Amazon at the link below in the show notes. My daylily website, sundragondaylilies.com, offers information on booking me for consultations on your specific genetics questions or mentoring for your breeding projects. It also lists all of my daylily introductions, the cultivars that are currently available, and links to my blog where you can find the bulk of my daylily writing. Thank you for joining me for this video, and I hope you'll be back for more. Have a great day.